Welcome to this webinar, which is going to look at MPSTOR's MPStackware data storage software. Okay, so let's have a look at the first tab, which is the Administration tab. In this section, we're going to look at Administration. Administration has got 4 tabs: Install, Setup, Users, and Disks. Looking at the Install tab, this allows us to see all of the installed components and their versions that you currently have in the MPStackware that you're running. Setup allows you to do system setup, which sets the time, day, and the storage name for your MPStackware. The SMTP setup allows setting up of all of the parameters required for email alerting. IP setup allows you to set up the management port IP address and indeed any other NICs that you currently have installed in the system. License setup composed of 2 parts. The first part is the hardware challenge, whereby the system will generate a challenge. That is sent back to MPSTOR, which will generate a license file. Once you have the license file installed on your laptop, just upload that license information, find the file, upload it, and your license will then be registered and your system will function correctly. Users allows you to add another user to the MPStackware GUI. Simply click on the Add User button, fill in the usernames, give them passwords, and then grant the user access rights, access privileges. And then that user can then access the system. And finally, disks. In the disk section, you see all of the disks that are currently installed in your system. The tabs along the top allow you to sort according to whatever that column is, such as model number, manufacturer, size, etc. Each disk is shown with an icon. A red icon means that the disk is currently offline or not present or has been pulled out of the system. A green icon means that the disk is present and functioning correctly. A orange icon would indicate that the disk is in some way degraded. Each storage object throughout the GUI has 3 additional buttons: 1 to view, 2 to edit, or 3 to delete that object. And that usage model of view, edit, and delete is consistent throughout the GUI. So that concludes our first section, the Administration section. Okay, now we're going to look at the System tab. In this section, we're going to look at the system. In the system, we have 4 tabs: Host, Logical Volume, RAID, and Enclosure. We'll begin by looking at Host. In the Host section, we define those servers which are going to have access to the storage array. In our example here, we have 4 hosts defined: Mail Server 1, Accounts, SQL Server, and Production. Mail Server 1 has been defined as a SAS fiber channel type connection, as well as SQL Server, and Accounts and Production 1 are 2 servers that are going to access the array using a network connection, such as iSCSI or CIFS. If we wish to add another server and give it rights to access the storage array, we simply click on the Add button, select whether that server is going to be SAS fiber channel or network. So we'll look here at an example of a network. We give it a name, such as File Server 1. We give it a password. And confirm the password. The green light will go on, and now that is a new registered user of the storage array. Okay, having created the various hosts that can access the system, the next tab to look at is RAID. In the RAID section, we simply create a RAID by clicking on the Add button, giving the RAID a name, selecting its quality of service, and the various other parameters belonging to the RAID, perhaps the most important being the RAID level, 0, 1, 5, or 6. In this example, we'll choose RAID level 0. Once having selected the RAID, we then need to select the disks that are going to be a member of that RAID. I'll simply organize my disks in terms of size here, and now I will start selecting disks I want to add to the RAID. Once having selected the disk, we move on to the next section, which is to decide how I want those disks organized. I can have them organized as 8 by 1 or 4 by 2. This is the rows and columns of how the disks will be associated in the RAID. This is now my summary of having made my selection. I simply create the RAID and wait for it to go online. So this RAID has now been created. I can now build logical volumes on top of this RAID. Having created a RAID, the next step is to create a logical volume. Simply click on the logical volume tab, add, and now we are ready to add another logical volume. This is perhaps one of the more complex things that has to be done on the storage array. First step is to give it a name. Okay, so LV1, and pick a size. I'll pick 50 gigabytes, and I'm going to enable the thin provisioning feature for this volume. That means that even though my size is 50 gigabytes, I do not have to provision all of the storage, all of that 50 gigabytes initially. I'm also going to enable another feature that's quite useful for volumes, which is bandwidth throttling. And this allows me to say that anybody who accesses this volume cannot access it at a bandwidth greater than 50 megabytes per second. You can choose anything from 1 to 200 megabytes per second as your bandwidth throttle. You can also select the I/O throttle. So, having configured my volume, I now need to allocate some storage from a RAID. So, the volume is 50 gigabytes. I'll just allocate 20 from this RAID. Move to the next step, and because the volume is thin provisioned, it's now requesting me to decide, once I have used up that initial 20 gigs, how will the next tranche of storage be allocated. So I'm going to say, when we get to 75% of the previously allocated storage, allocate another 30 gigs. Now, once having set up that part of the volume, I need to decide where is the volume going to be exported. I can export it in this configuration to a SAS port, Ethernet ports 0 or Ethernet port 1. I'm going to, in this example, choose Ethernet port 1. And having done that, I need to decide whether I want to export it as either iSCSI or CIFS. I'll use CIFS. I'll use iSCSI, and I'll move on to the next step. So now we see from our previous example of having configured hosts that I can now say that this volume should be seen by one or more servers that are network servers. In this case, I'm going to say it can be seen by accounts and file server 1. And now I'm ready to create my logical volume. So this logical volume is a thin provisioned 50 gig volume that currently has 20 gig reserved. It's built on a RAID with RAID level 0, and it has been exported across iSCSI to 2 servers. My logical volume has now been created successfully. If I then want to view my logical volume, I can view it. I can see that it is 50 gigs. It has 20 gigs allocated. If I want to view which hosts have been mapped to, I can see them in this view. If I want to see what RAIDs it's built on, I just click on the view RAIDs, and I can see that it's built on RAID 1, and that RAID 1 is online and good. And if I want to see what ports it's exported on, I can see that it's exported on an Ethernet port. Finally, if I want to view the enclosure details, I simply click on the enclosure tab and then view the enclosure that I'm currently connected to. And I have a front view and a back view. The front view allows me to see which disks are currently populated and to view what are the disk details of that disk that's currently being used. Or I can view the entire back of the enclosure and see what's the current PSU fan, temperature, voltage, or current readings. So for every enclosure that MPStackware is running on, there is a different front and back view, and this is usually customized for the particular array that you're running on. We're now going to look at the various applications that run within MPStackware. So within applications we have snapshot and we have tools. Looking at the snapshots, we can see all of the snapshots that are currently present in the system. In this system we have none. So let's add a snapshot. A snapshot has a name, snapshot 1, a retention policy, which basically is how long we keep the snapshot for, whether it's locked, kept for a period, or none. Every snapshot needs a buffer size, so in this case we'll specify 10 gigs as the buffer size, and we'll say that when the snapshot reaches 10 gigs we'll re-provision an additional 10 gig. We also can specify whether the snapshot is Windows compatible or not. Snapshots for Linux or Unix systems do not require this button to be clicked, but a snapshot for Windows compatible does. So I'm going to say that this snapshot will be used in a Windows environment. Automatic export means that if the snapshot is created, that it will be automatically exported as a volume. The default is it is not exported. So finally is the schedule of when the snapshot occurs. I can set a start date, and then I can say whether that snapshot repeats once hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. So I'm going to set up a monthly snapshot, and my time will be 12. So now I set up a snapshot. Noon every month on the 14th, and my end date will be up to March. Once having created the snapshot, I then need to specify on which volume I'm going to make the snapshot. In this case we only have one volume configured, so I'll select LV1. And the buffer space from which to take space from, I'll specify that can come from RAID 1. So this is my overall panel. My snapshot is SS1, retention policy is locked, buffer size 10. At 90% of that buffer size it's going to re-provision another 10 gigs. The start time will be January the 14th. It'll be on the 14th of every month and it'll end in April. So now I see I have indeed created a volume, and notice that the creation date currently is 0 because I haven't yet hit the time at which the snapshot will be taken. In the tool section I have 3 sub-menus: system log, IOC tools, and diagnostic. Looking at the system log, this gives us a view of the internal log of the system. This can be useful in support environments where a portion of or the entire system log can be cut, pasted, and emailed if the system support team requires. Looking at the IOC tools are the I/O controller tools. The I/O controller tools are used for setting up, in the case of SAS ports, whether the SAS port should be a target initiator, a by 1, a by 4, or by 8 wide port, and in the case of Ethernet ports, setting up the IP configuration, or whether ports should be bonded or not. So if we look here at the SAS I/O tool, we can see that the installed device, which is a SAS 3801E, has got 2 ports, port 0, port 1. The current port width is 4 on each of those ports, and one of those ports is set to target initiator mode and another is set to initiator mode. I can quite simply choose the port I want, and select an action, such as reset the by 4 port back to a by 1, or alternatively I could change the initiator mode from, say, initiator to target or target initiator. So this is the usage of the tools, the IOC tools. So to recap, it allows you to set the port width to 1, 4 or 8, and to select whether a port is in target mode or initiator mode. So looking at the Ethernet section of the IOC tools, we can see that once we click on a port, we can see its current configuration. So this port is now currently working. The link is up, it's at 100 megs a second. If I click on the edit button, I will be able to change its IP configuration. And then more importantly, I can actually bond multiple Ethernet ports together by clicking on the bonding port, selecting the ports that I wish to bond together. One of those ports has to be the primary slave, so the Ethernet or the IP address of the bonded port will now be the IP address of the primary slave. I can also select an additional bonding mode, such as balanced, active backup, balanced, broadcast 802.3, etc. And finally, diagnostics. Diagnostics is typically done in conjunction with the support team, whereby the support team will send you a source URL for a diagnostic test to be run. Input the URL into the source URL box and click Next. This will then execute that diagnostic test and send the result to MPSTOR. Analytics are a key part of data storage, so let's have a look at the Analytics tab. In this section, we're going to have a look at Analytics. Analytics have 4 tabs: the Log Viewer, the Stats History, Asset Management, and Alert Management. Let's begin by looking at the Log Viewer. In the Log Viewer, we have a timestamp of all of the actions that occur in the GUI or in MPStackware, such as a user GUI change or a system change. So if I sort by element name, I can see here that we created a host mapping, we stopped, added, deleted various host mappings, that we created logical volumes, stopped them, deleted them. So all of these actions are all noted in the log viewer, and the log viewer can be organized by timestamp, by action, by element name, or element type. So now let's have a look at the stats history. In the stats history, we keep a history of all of the statistics per element type. So if I organize an element type here, we can see the type of elements that we're keeping statistics on are disks, the various initiators that are sending IOs, the logical volumes, IOs that occur on ports, and that IOs are sent to RAIDs. So if we had a number of RAIDs or a number of ports or logical volumes or disks, statistics would be kept on all of those elements. So let's have a look and see what type of information we keep. Well, we keep track of the number of read IOs, write IOs, the cumulative number of IOs, the various IO errors, whether they're miscellaneous SCSI errors, SCSI read, SCSI write errors, SCSI IO errors, commands that failed. So there's a comprehensive list of statistics relating to every disk, volume, initiator, port, and RAID in the system. In asset management, we keep a track of all of the element types in the system. These are all of the physical devices in the system, such as disks, power supplies, controllers, expanders. And we note their start time, their uptime. And based on the start time, uptime and usage, we keep a track and we manage when that asset needs to be replaced. Alert management allows us to generate alerts. These are email alerts to an email address when a system error occurs or when any system event occurs. The type of events that we can alert on are basically information events, warning events, or critical events. So as an example, we'll add in a new email alert. I'll send it to myself. I can set that the alert level be critical, warning, or information. I'll get critical events, and when I get this event, I'll make sure that the subject is critical event and select hello. So now on any critical event, wo@mpstore.com will get an email. And finally, we're going to look at some of the support functions within MPStackware. In this final section, we're going to look at support features. In support features, we have 4 tabs: upload the new version, support log, support portal, and contacts. So let's have a look at upload new version. On upload new version, the first thing we see is the current version of the software that's installed in the system and the release notes for that version. If we want to get a new version, we simply hit get new version, and by default you'll be pointed to the URL from where you can download a new version, and simply click next, and that will start and initialize the download. The support log allows us to see if any issues within the system or if any problems have been noted that need to be reported back to MPSTOR. So any problems that occur in your MPStackware, a support log is created, and that support log can be emailed directly back to MPSTOR. In the support log, we can see any events that have occurred in the system which require attention by the support team. So to view what the issue was, simply click on the view button, and we can see that this issue here needs to be reported to the MPSTOR support team. Simply hit the send button, click OK, and the issue will be sent to MPSTOR. And finally, the support portal and contacts will provide you with all of the URLs and contact numbers with which to contact MPSTOR support. Many thanks for looking at the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Many thanks for looking at the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about MPStackware, please visit the MPStore website, mpstore.com. Thank you.